Right, this is part 3, and we are looking at curtain walls in this one. Applied exactly the same way as walls are, but there's a little bit of jiggling around with grids on the curtain wall as well. So you're going to add a grid and then turn that grid into a mullion and basically change the panels. You have a couple of basic panels to start off with, a solid one and a glazed one, but you can, again, as it's a family, and it behaves the way that families do, you can update it and change it and do whatever you like to it. One thing to mention about curtain walls is that doors that you would normally apply to walls don't work in curtain walls. They work in normal walls, and they would work in this wall, but they wouldn't actually work in a curtain wall system. You need to use a curtain wall panel that looks like a door. That's the way that curtain walls work. So that's the one caveat with using them. So often you'll see people trying to put a door into a curtain wall because the family template just isn't configured to work with curtain walls. So before I put the curtain wall in, even though I could put it in 3D, I'll go to the ground floor layout first, and then we'll go to wall, and I'm on the architecture tab. It makes a difference. Wall architectural, and then in the properties, just hit this drop down, the type properties button as it is, and scroll down to curtain walls. And there we see curtain wall, exterior glazing and storefront. These are the three types that we get loaded in by default. So we'll pick curtain wall. And the only difference between a curtain wall, a shop front and the exterior glazing is that some of them come pre-configured with the mullions and transoms, so or the grid set up on them. So base constraint is at level 0. And we're going up to, this time we'll go up a bit higher, we'll go up to the third level, the roof level, we might as well. And that's kind of aligned here. The offset, well, we're not going to have an offset at the moment, we'll offset it maybe later. And the location line, it doesn't exist in this one. So I'll start from, say, this point, and I'll just click there and drag out this way. And all I'm getting is a piece of glass. And then I'll come down to this point here, and I'll finish it at that point there. So escape twice, and then we can see if we hover over it, it says curtain walls, and we get this sort of end point of the curtain wall and the dotted line that identifies the curtain wall. And if we look at the 3D view, all we've got is a piece of glass that comes in and round the bend. Okay, so this curtain wall starts off life as a piece of glass at the moment. Now you can have a curtain wall with nothing in it, but you have to pre-configure that yourself. Now I need to divide this curtain wall up into a series of grids. I don't think it's probably impossible to have a piece of glass that big, but certainly the practicalities of it are a bit ridiculous. So it's probably easier to play around with in the elevation view on this. So we'll go to the west elevation, which is this one, and this is our curtain wall, but we can see it again. If I turn on shaded mode, we get a nice blue colour that sort of identifies it. And I need to use this option, which is on the architecture tab. It doesn't exist on the structure tab, so I have to go to the architecture tab. It's really more of an architectural element, but useful to know about anyway, because you can have structural curtain wall systems. And we want to put in a curtain grid, so we want to click on this little icon. So if I hover over the horizontal edges, it's going to give me vertical, and if I hover over the vertical, it gives me horizontal grids. Now this grid system likes to jump to thirds, and if I just track along, it might sort of snap to a third point and also to the half point as well. So 10075 in my case, and the reason that is because the curtain wall sort of starts at this point from that grid line and extends past that point, so it's not going to be quite at that grid line. But we want to make it sort of balanced when we look at it externally, not necessarily to sort of align with our internal grid system. So I'll click there for my first one, and then I'll come along and let's say there, and then I'll come in. So I've got grid panels that are about 2.5 meters wide, and that might be a bit too wide. You're looking at more likely to be 1200, but you can adjust these to whichever you want, but I'll keep them for argument's sake That's 2518, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 panels going across there, and I can do a similar thing this side. I'll just jump to the midpoint and then the midpoint again, and again it's very easy to put these things in. And then what I want to do is also cover up this edge of floor. So whilst I'd probably want maybe a solid panel down a certain height, and again we've got a situation where if I'm hovering over the edge, then I'm reading the distance from the bottom. Maybe if I come down to this one, so I can see that if I zoom in a bit, so I can see that dimension line. I probably want the bottom panel, if it was to be an obscure panel, maybe about 900mm up from the base. I'd certainly want a panel to come in and sort of hide this floor edge, because if I want glazing, so I could move that up. And again, adjustable after the event, so I've got a 3 meter by 2 meter piece of glass. That's a big lump of glass again. And if I come in at this point now, this is sitting over that, so instead of just dragging these things out, I'll change the scale from there to 1 to 50. That'll just reduce that down, so I can come in and pop these in like so. So all I'm doing at the moment is putting a grid in, and I could also have that in so that that's looking at about 900mm up. There you go, and another one 900mm. So that's given us a grid system on this face. Now the grid system, all it's done is split these bits of glass. Okay, it hasn't actually put any mullions in yet, so if we look at 3D, all we've got is this sort of arrangement now. So it's not difficult to do, but this is the way we have to deal with it. And also we've got the column coming down there, so ideally having a panel coming down this bit and this bit would be better. Now because of that graphic view, I forgot to consider this, so I could adjust it in the elevation. So back to the west elevation, and there's my column. So there's a split at that point, so it's going to affect everything down this way. But if I could just put a curtain grid in sort of at this point, and then we can sort of sort these out later. Now I could just hover over that, select the grid. I've got options to adjust. Alternatively, I could just select that whole section there, and under the filter just click on curtain wall panels and select curtain wall grids and say OK, and then I can hit delete, and that's deleted all those grids. So now I've got something that's going to cover up the column, and I can come back in with my grid and pop that in the center and divide this up again equally. So often it's a case of just re-looking at this. And again, I've got a column in this place as well, so I made a right pig's ear of this, but we might as well go through the whole process of seeing how easy it is to edit. So delete, just selected those curtain panels, I'll delete those. And again, my curtain grid, so select the curtain grid and I'll pop one in kind of just around about here. And then we go center, center and center. So there you go, that's probably a bit more lined up. So now I need to put in the mullions. Okay, and again, all the mullion is a profile. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. So if I click on mullion to start off with, we look at the modified place mullion. The mullions are going to just behave as far as they're concerned. They're just going to sort of tie in with all the grids. That's what they are meant to do. But this rectangular mullion, currently 50 by 150. If I click the drop down, I've got circular mullions, L corners, quad mullions, rectangular squares, trapezoidal ones and V ones. So there's all different types of mullions I could use, but we'll continue with this one, and then we'll look at the type properties of that. And this is where there's a little bit more information on it. All that's telling me is that it's a rectangle and it's 50 across and 150mm deep. This, however, tells me a bit more. So the thickness of it is 150. The width on one side is 25mm, the width on the other side, so it's going to straddle the grid line. The material is aluminium. It's going to be perpendicular to the face, and its profile is that default profile. Okay, so if I wanted the offset or an angle on it, then I could adjust them in the type properties, but I would also have to make sure that I duplicate it and give it another name, because it's more specific than the basic 50 by 150. So I'll just cancel out of that. The application of the mullions are either on the grid line, a grid segment, or all grid lines. I'm just going to quickly put these in, so I'm going to choose all grid lines for this. and then you just hover over the curtain wall system, click on all grid lines, and then your grids are put in. So okay, now we've got this set up. Okay, so everywhere that there was a split in the grid, it's applied this curtain wall system. Okay, and it's sitting, this is 150mm deep, and it's 25mm either side of the grid. Now I could make slight adjustments. I couldn't make universal adjustments to anything in particular, simply because the type properties that are applied to this curtain grid system mean that anything I do to one updates the rest of them. But what I could do is swap one out. Instead of a rectangular mullion 50 by 150, I could go for a 50mm radius mullion, and that's just going to be slightly different, and it looks a bit weird across here because there's the break. So what I could also do is sort of link these up. Now you can't really see that. I might be able to adjust it so we can see that little crisscross shape. That defines how these grids are connected. So at the moment it's split, so this is the dominant way, but if I just click on this, it means that these things will join up. So this is the dominant fashion. And again, this is one of those situations where by clicking on it, it tells you what it's going to look like as opposed to what it already is. So a bit similar to the cropping options. So again, having that done, it only applies to one. Okay, so you can adjust these things, and again, if I selected that thing and toggled that, then this runs through. Okay, so a couple of things there. So our curtain wall system looks okay, but we've got the situation where the floor is looking a bit of a mess. Actually, this is far too high compared to this. So again, we'll look at some editing. So I need to come down, let's say call it 700 for argument's sake. So back into the west elevation. Now I'm having trouble because I can't see the stuff behind, okay, because of this color. So this is going to give me a great opportunity to override graphics in view. Okay, so if I select the curtain wall and then right click and go to override graphics in view by element or category, let's choose element because it's the curtain wall element, and for surface transparency, this option, I can make that slightly transparent. So I'll take it down to a 50-odd% transparency and apply that, and then we can see what's going on behind it. So this override graphics in view thing is a great little tool for allowing us to just override specific graphics in this specific view. It's not going to be the same for other views, but it's just this one. So it allows me then greater flexibility with the positioning of these things. So to get this right, I'm going to tab in so I can find that grid line. So I've got the grid line, and I'm going to, with this one selected, so I'm going to, this is a tricky little maneuver, so you're going to tab in again until you pick up the other grid line. So I've got that as well. So that's already one selected. To add to the selection, it's the control key. So I'm going to click and add the two. So I've got both of them selected. And then I'll use the move tool, and I can move both of these down, say to that point. So that's now sitting at floor line, and this one is covering that bit there. Okay, so a much nicer fix to this. If I want to move this up a bit further, then I can. So this one seems okay, but it's just slightly down. Now another method of doing it is just by dragging all the way across and using the filter and checking none and going to curtain wall grids and OK. So those are the grids, and again I'll use the move tool, and I'm not moving them down anything specific, but I could enter a value if I wanted to, but I'm not. Now this one's not quite right, so again I'll just tab in to that grid line and select that, and then just drag this down a little bit as well, so we're okay there. Okay, so that's covered up there. So you can see how flexible this system is. Everything's adjusting itself ever so nicely to line up. So now we've got these things covering the edge of the concrete, and we've got this panel down here. How do we change the look from glass to solid? Well, that's quite easy. You just tab into the panel, so it highlights the panel like so, and select it. And it currently says system panel glazed. So if we just hit this drop down and then come right down to the bottom, there's one below it called solid. So if I change that to system panel solid, then that's a solid panel. Now there's no color applied to it, so how do we do that? Well, we just go back into select it, and we can edit type, and we can duplicate, and we'll call it solid red or green or whatever color you want, and OK. And the material is the default material. So we need to click on this bit and hit the ellipsis symbol, and this is going to take us down to our materials, and that default color is just a grey color. So I'll stretch this out so we can see, and I'll stretch this back so it's like that. If I want to make a sort of a duplicate default material, then I could duplicate this material, but what I'll use is a proper material. So I'll look for it's an aluminium panel, so I'll put down alu, and cladding, vertical grid, metal, steel, so roofing, stainless steel. We'll just choose this one. So this is an aluminium panel, but the material color is not quite right. So what I need to do is duplicate this. Now this process for using materials we will be covering as well, but it is a bit of a pain to get your head around. But right click and duplicate. That's the first thing. So that's what I've done. The material properties I've got for the aluminium don't change, but all I want to do is change the surface color. So I'll call this aluminium red. So that's already done, but still doesn't look anything like the color that we want. So I'll click on this thing and choose a nice sort of reddy color. I can drop that down a bit so it's a nice sort of deep red. That's okay. So that's now changed the graphics color of it. The appearance, however, is not going to change. And the other thing we need to bear in mind is that we've got assets that are shared. So even though in the shaded mode it will look red, if we rendered it, it wouldn't look red. It would just look the way it normally looks in this rendered mode. And so to update that color option, that's another story, but it's to do with this thing. It looks like a pen nib upside down, but it's actually a hand holding out, and this is the sharing hand. If it's got an asset that's shared with other things, then it tells you how many times it's shared. So it's shared with 3 different things, so you end up having to use this option to duplicate the asset in this aluminium red. Then it's not sharing with anything, and then I can update this to something else. Okay, and I can put a relief pattern in it, cutouts, and I'll go to tint, and I'll change the tint to something like we had. And okay, and then that should update that like so. Okay, so I've got this nice shiny red sort of aluminium panel. So now it's changed the look on that. So if I click apply, okay, then I can make sure that my material finish is this aluminium red, and I can say okay to that. And then we get the graphic display, which is the one that shows up in shaded mode. And if I went to render it, we'd have a nice shiny sort of red finish. So we've also now got another solid panel called aluminium red. So if I just to tab in and select that, now it tells me it's the system panel solid red. So I'll just do the same thing with the other bits, and again we'll use the filter because it's so much easier. There is this option down the bottom which selects elements by face. Now if I untick that and I just click on this, it selects the entire curtain wall system, so can't really help in this instance, so I'll just untick it. So it sometimes causes more problems than it solves, but the easiest way again is to select these things. Just marquee grab across there and filter, and curtain panels. We'll untick the others. We don't want the grids or the mullions, and we say OK, and multiple selected, so we'll drop down to our solid red, and that's put them all in like so. Okay, so the reason we can still see through it is because we've still got that graphic overrides set. And I'll do a similar thing for these, and I'll control select these and control select that, filter, check none, just the curtain panels, okay, and then we drop down and choose solid red. So there we've got our nice sort of breakup on the bits I missed there. So the filter, use the filter, is so much easier than tabbing through and adding to selection, and panels, okay, and solid red. Alright, so there. Now we just need to sort out our graphic overrides because we're okay now, and I'll also just get rid of this grid line, so just move in, filter, curtain grids, okay, and delete the curtain grid. The mullions disappear with it because they're associated with that grid. And then if I just select the curtain wall and right click and override graphics in view by element and then reset, okay, it's back to the way it was. Okay, so even though it doesn't look quite as nice, that's what we've got now. So back to 3D, and this is how it's going to look. So curtain wall system with our panels looking quite nice, and if we went to the ray trace, then we get some sort of effect as to how this would look when we come to render it. I think that's as far as it's going to go with its ray tracing. So not a brilliant sort of finish on the ray trace, but if we rendered it out, it would look a little bit more exciting than that. But that's how curtain wall systems work. I'll just go back to shaded mode and just talk about the doors. I'm putting doors in, so the doors will obey again the curtain wall systems. So if I wanted to put a door up here for whatever reason, maybe we had an escape or something, then I would just tab in to that panel, select it, and we've got a system panel glazed. Now we want to put in a different type of panel, so we'll load one up. So I'll click on the load option and come down to curtain wall panels, and if we have double glass, or this one maybe, or that one, solid, this one we'll choose, okay, and that's an interior double glass, but it makes no difference. So I can say okay, and then that's changed to a door. So double doors, interior glass, and you can see the way it's kind of set up. These handles are fixed in position, but this is going to sort of climb up to the height of this. It's a 3 meter high door. Alright, so that's pretty much it. I think the door is probably back to front. Yes, it is. So now if we look at our first floor layout, and we should be able to see our curtain wall system with our door, and we can select that and flip that so it opens the other way, back to 3D, and then you can actually see the handles on the outside. Okay, so that's applying a door to a curtain system. Doors to other bits and pieces, they're just so easy. So again, it's too easy to show you as a supplementary to what we'll have looked at in class, but that's your wall bit covered. So concrete walls, modifying the profile of the wall we've looked at there. We've applied curtain wall systems, and we've applied a typical sort of basic wall. Things like stacked walls and applying sort of foundations to walls, etc. We'll discuss in class, but that's as much as you need to know for the purposes of this.